everyone, welcome back. I'm Melissa Pineda, and today I will be discussing the book Galileo, A Life by James Reston Jr. So Mr. Reston Jr. Was an American author and journalist. He passed away last year, 2023, and he wrote this book on Galileo. He was criticized a little bit for injecting a little too much of his personality into the book, and I can see that throughout. He was very opinionated, and in my opinion, his anti-Catholic sentiments were apparent. But apart from him injecting his commentary into his book, I thought the information he provided on Galileo was quite interesting. So why would you want to read this book? Well, it contains a ton of information about this incredible man. He was an astronomer, he was a physicist, an engineer, many have called him a polymath, and he invented all sorts of things. His life was truly fascinating, so that's why, and let me dive right in. Before I do dive right in, I just wanted to say if there's anything today that you find interesting or that you like from what I'm saying, please like and subscribe if you haven't already. Okay, so Galileo Galilei. Reston Jr. kind of talks about his life, his personal life, and then his professional life as well. So personal life, Galileo never married, had some illegitimate children, had to take care of his family, basically by himself. He came from a poor family, and he had two sisters that he had to take care of, and so the one was actually a nun, and then she decided she didn't want that life anymore. She wanted to get married, and the dowries for both his sisters fell on him. And his brothers-in-law actually ended up taking him to court to sue for dowries. And he was in and out of court quite a bit over his lifetime, some very sad periods there. And Reston refers to his brother, Galileo's brother, as a deadbeat. And he had, I think, 7 or 8 kids, and then dumped his whole family, including his wife, on Galileo while he went gallivanting and doing stuff that he wanted to do. I think he was a musician, so when he was pursuing his dreams, Galileo was kind of left to take care of his family. And like he did too, like Galileo did all of these things. Took care of his illegitimate daughters as well. And yes, so in terms of professionally, he was an inventor. He invented some truly amazing things that just were incredible for that time period. He invented a magnet, which he dedicated to the Medici family, one of his patrons. He wasn't recognized. He wasn't like respected, and his genius wasn't really recognized at all in Florence, which was really painful for him. It was, Florence was his home, and Florence at this time, I mean, if you read any of the Renaissance writings, everyone wanted to be in Florence. The Medicis were in Florence, and the money was in Florence for the arts and for the sciences, and the inventors were in Florence. And so for Galileo, it was quite painful that he wasn't recognized there for having that potential. And but Venice recognized him, and he ended up inventing the spyglass, which was later called the telescope. And he dedicated this to the Doge of Venice. And so Galileo actually became one of their highest paid professors with lifetime job security. And he was appointed for life, but he was miserable. And he actually used this as a bargaining chip with Florence to kind of get back there, like, oh, well, look what I've been recognized here, and this is what I've been paid here. And so he used this, and it eventually worked. He burned a bridge with Venice, though, and he was eventually kind of like welcomed back and given a position, a teaching position in Florence. So, and as an aside, Galileo was buried in Florence, and he was buried in the Basilica of Santa Croce there, and here's a picture. So I actually took it myself. I was there in February of this year, 2024, and it was beautiful. I mean, Florence itself is lovely, but yes, the church is so beautiful. Galileo invented the telescope, as discussed, and he wanted to be recognized as a philosopher and a scientist, not as a mere instrument maker. And he made many, many instruments. I mean, one of which was to check a patient's pulse too. Like, things he invented, it was really, really innovative. And he actually discovered 4 new stars and dedicated them to the Medici family. He wrote a book, The Starry Messenger, published in 1610, and this was one of the most important books of the 17th century. Galileo got into some trouble with his telescope, though. So what he observed was that there were some black blemishes on the sun that changed. It appeared, disappeared, reappeared, and they were continuously altering. But for the Catholic Church at this time, to display blemishes on the sun, which was the source of light and warmth to man, it basically attacked a cherished Christian belief that the heavens were pure, perfect, incorruptible, and unchanging. And according to the Catholic Church at this time, Galileo was basically saying that the heavens aren't perfect and that they are corruptible. So his findings were basically being positioned as if they were in direct opposition to Scripture. And Galileo was also being accused at this time of making telescopes with like pieces in them to give the illusion of stars. So even what he was observing was questioned, the validity of what he was seeing and observing, and also what the observations meant in terms of the Catholic Church and in terms of Scripture. Galileo, though, wasn't arguing this. He was just saying, like, as a scientist, as an astronomer, like, this is what I see, this is what I'm finding. And unfortunately, the Catholic Church was sort of reading into what he was finding as if it was in opposition to God. Galileo was basically saying that the Church didn't understand astronomy. And you can imagine how well that went over. He was also saying that Aristotle was wrong and that Copernicus was right. And so Aristotle believed, and it was common knowledge at this point in time, that Aristotle was right, that the Earth was the center of the universe, not the sun. And Galileo was saying he's wrong, and he was basically on Copernicus's side and was intent on proving him right. And so Galileo defended Copernicus, and I should speak a little bit about him. So Nicholas Copernicus was a Polish astronomer. So he lived from 1473 to 1543. And he stated that the Earth orbits around the sun. So the sun is the fixed point for the planets. And so Copernicus he served as a church canon. And basically that's like an administrative position within the Catholic Church. So he collected rents from church-owned lands, he secured military defenses, he managed the bakery and the mills, things of that nature. So his idea of the heavens or the universe at this time was heliocentric, so sun-centered. And yes, and this is what Galileo believed as well. So Galileo knew, and the Catholic Church knew as well, that his observations through his telescope had basically destroyed Aristotle's argument and the biblical hypothesis of the heavens. And basically, at this point, Galileo hadn't yet proven Copernicus right, but he knew that he was right and that he could prove it if he had more time to test and debate and publish. And so that was kind of like the path that he was on. And then the church decided to start an inquisition against Galileo, and the Catholic Church made an edict against Copernicus. This basically positioned the church as anti-science at this point. And Galileo, though, was determined to prove Copernicus right, and an inquisition was started in 1633, and Galileo was basically accused of being a heretic. And he was imprisoned in the Vatican. So at the end of the Inquisition, the church decided that he needed to confess, basically to being a heretic. He was wrong. He had to confess that everything he saw with his telescope was incorrect. And he was faced with torture, so he was forced to recant, and he was condemned to prison for life. He was forbidden to talk about cosmology or the Copernican theory, and his book was publicly burned, basically as trash. He was 70 at the time. He had narrowly escaped excommunication, and the church basically humiliated him, exiled him from Florence, which was like the worst thing that they could do apart from excommunication. And he was eventually released from house arrest when his daughter got very, very ill. Like when she was on her deathbed, he was released, and she actually died at the age of 33. And it just gets worse from there. So Galileo went blind from cataracts. Going blind just seems like such a cruel ending for someone like Galileo that got so much enjoyment out of being able to examine things through his own invention. So in any event, hundreds of years later, 1992, Pope John Paul II declares that mistakes were made, and an apology and a formal recognition of error was made by the Catholic Church. But yeah, too little, too late, I would argue, and it's a shame. It's a shame that Galileo had to experience everything he did, but in any event, it doesn't take away from Galileo's life and from his accomplishments and from his inventions, and this man was truly a genius. So I really enjoyed the read, and if there's anything that you found interesting in what I've said today, pick yourself up a copy. I've obviously just talked about points that I found interesting and just a very brief summary, so there's so much more in Reston Jr.'s book. So thank you for joining me, and please don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't already, and until next time.